We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hey everyone, I'm so glad to have you back every single week. It's just wonderful to know that you're here, and I'm so happy to share with you an interview today with Sona Avetisyan. Sona is someone who I have been in contact with for months and months on end, and we've been talking about having her on the show, and the more she shares with me her personal story and the more we get to know each other, the more I am like, oh my gosh, you are amazing. And I couldn't help but want to make sure that today's episode focused on the unconventional choices that Sona has made in her life as a result of living with less, and also directly involved with how she's pared down her life. It's a really personal and really inspiring episode that I hope will help you kind of understand how the peace that comes with living with less can infiltrate every single area of our lives. And Sona is a professional organizer who lives in LA. She is a mom of two. She is a skateboarder. Can you believe? I mean, I think that's the coolest thing ever. She's just an all-around, really intentional human being, which you'll hear as she speaks. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Sona Avetisyan. Hi, Sona. I'm so happy you're here. I know we've been talking about having you on the podcast for too long. So I'm so happy that we've made it happen. How are you?
Me too. I'm doing great, and I'm so happy we're finally making it happen.
It's going to be awesome. So for those who don't know you, can you introduce yourself to the listeners and let them know a little bit about yourself?
Of course. I am Sona Avetisyan, and I'm a professional organizer and a decluttering coach. And I have two girls, 12 and 8 years old. Yeah, that's about it. And I'm the ultimate minimalist.
I love it. I love that you're like, and that's about it, as if raising two children and owning your own business is not a lot. Have you always been a super organized person? Tell me how starting an organizing business came about for you.
Mm-hmm. I have always been super organized for as long as I can remember. Maybe not as a young kid. I do remember my mom pulling all of my clothes out of my wardrobe and putting them on the floor and telling me that I can't go and play with my friends until I put everything back. I do remember that, but I think I loved spending time with kids so much that I maybe taught myself to do it so I didn't have to lose any time. But as long as I can remember, I have always been super organized. As for doing it as my job, I call it my calling because I'm so passionate about it and about making other moms' lives easier. That is just part of my life, part of my being, I would say. Before doing professional organizing, I used to organize companies. Like I would walk into a company and learn everybody's jobs and see what could be improved and how the departments could communicate better. I have this knack for organizing in every form. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you can kind of just see a high level picture and where it could be, where it could go. Whenever I talk to my husband, he's like, that's the part I struggle with. It's like I can walk into a space and be like, ooh, I want to do this and put this here. And I can see it. It sounds like you can see it kind of with anything, which is really, really cool. So you did a pretty massive declutter of your own personal space, even in the last couple years. Can you walk us through more of your personal story of when you became really intentional about what you own, besides just naturally an organized person?
Yeah, sure. So what happened was my husband and I really loved to travel. We spent so much time like traveling the world. We lived in a two-bedroom apartment, and we always got so much criticism from his family that like, you guys are growing old, you need to buy a house, you need to have an investment, this is so important, you got to grow up, and all of this over the years and over again. And my husband was more into he wanted to have a huge backyard, a big house. He really cares about all of that. And for me, I always thought of a house as somewhere where I was going to entertain people, where I was going to have beautiful parties and connect. And over the years, like mm, as all other couples, we gathered money for a long time. And finally, we were able to invest in our dream house. At least that's what I thought it was for us. For him, it definitely was and still is. But for me, what I realized going from a two-bedroom to a five-bedroom, since I like to have clutter-free surroundings and everything, I like to have everything so beautiful, and I really thrive on beautiful aesthetics. But I was spending so much time every day just designing the space and buying more things, and um, all of that time that I could before spend with my friends or doing things I loved, it was going on maintaining this house, and I really wasn't as happy as I thought I would be. So after 17 years together, it came to a point where we decided that we would separate, and then it ended with a divorce. But when we were discussing who was going to live where, I said, I really don't think I want to live in this house, even though it was a beautiful house. It really was. So when I was moving out, I became very intentional about how I wanted to live the rest of my life or the next few years. And I realized that I was going to have a huge change in my life. I was going to go from a lot of help to no help. I was going to go from working for his company to I didn't know what was next. I was going to go from my community to um, at that point, I decided I was going to move to a different city. And it was going to be a lot of changes. And the most important thing, I was going to go from a relationship, from my kids seeing us together, to a total unknown. And I realized that the most important thing for me was my kids' emotional well being, for me to have time to go through all of these changes. So I moved into a studio apartment with my two kids, and this is where my minimalist lifestyle started. Um, and that year, even though it was pretty challenging, going through this massive change, it was also the happiest and the most connecting with my kids. We had so much time because it would take me literally 10 to 15 minutes to tidy up my space. It was still beautiful. And, we could spend so much time together just being outdoors and doing things that we really, truly loved.
Oh, okay, you're living my dream because whenever we drive past like apartment complexes now, I told my husband I get almost jealous. Like I get like oh like whimsical, like I wish I could live there, you know? And he's like, "What are you talking about? Like we have 3 kids and 2 dogs and and like that's not our life anymore." And I'm like, "But doesn't it sound nice that you don't have much space to put stuff, so you don't have a whole lot of stuff, so you just get out and so I mean, I completely get why that would feel good. And it's in some ways, right? Like in some ways the hardest parts in our lives. Like I can imagine that going through the loss of your marriage after 17 years was probably one of the hardest things in your life.
Yeah.
They often lead us toward more intention and really defining our values. So,
Mhm.
and I know you've expressed this, that you have a really strong passion, not just for minimalism itself, not just for living with less itself, but
Mhm.
how that reflects in values and priorities. So I have a two-part question for you. How did you develop a sense of what those values and priorities actually were. Like, how did you identify those? And then next, what steps did you take to design your time and your space to reflect those things?
hmm So when I moved into the studio apartment, it was actually um, very expensive. It was almost half of the mortgage of that house, and it was at the beach. And everybody was like, "Why would you spend so much money on a studio apartment? With this money, you can have a huge house here and there." And I was like, "Okay, but that's not what makes me happy. Like a huge house, okay, but that's not what makes me happy." And then I asked myself, okay, what makes me happy? And then I wrote down, like I took a list, and I often tell my friends to do this when they don't know what their values are. And I wrote down 10 of my fondest memories, like the time where everything felt so good. Like if I died at that moment, I would feel like it doesn't matter because I got to experience this moment. And when I wrote it down, I realized that for me, for example, one of those memories was when during COVID, we had a little fire, bonfire in our backyard, and all of our friends were just, we had music, we were talking and laughing and enjoying the music, dancing, and then you might think like, oh, I wish I had a big house. This if I had a big house, I could have that. But then when I looked at all of my memories, I realized that the common denominator in all of this was not the house, because a lot of memories were around spending time with people. One was at this backyard, another was at the beach, another was at the park. So it had nothing to do with the house. For me, the happiness is when I spend time with my community, with my people, when I can do, my exercise and healthy eating. That is very important for me because I have lost both my parents to health issues. Another one is fun. I really like, adventure with my kids. And yet another is purpose. When I can help people, when I feel that purpose, everything else just seems like I'm the happiest person in the world, and nobody can take that away from me. So when I realized what those values are for me, I realized that I was going to cut everything out, no matter how much I like doing the other stuff, and prioritize these first, because when I have these, I feel like the happiest person in the world. So, there are
Ugh.
so many things. We're just bombarded by like marketing messages, by so many fun activities and things to buy, and all of that. And yes, all of that is cool. All of that is fun, but there's not enough time in the day to do it all, to acquire it all. So you have to be very intentional about what you put in your life. And then after that, if you have time for anything else, fine. If not, then at least you got the most important things for you. So,
It's interesting that, first of all, I couldn't love all of that anymore. I just think that's so wise that we often think we need a big space in order to be hospitable, in order to
mhm,
spend time with people. And that's just not true. That's just blatantly not true. Um,
mhm,
and then beyond that, like, I really do think that there's something to be said about prioritizing what is important. And it sounds so obvious. So many of us are like, of course you prioritize what's important to you. But when we really look back at how, or step back and look at how we're spending our time, oftentimes we're spending our time doing all the things that we think we should be doing and that we get roped into doing, and that just you get on this hamster wheel, and then you try and fit in the quality
mhm,
time with people. You try and fit in these things that are actually the most important to you. You're just squeezing in there, right? Instead
yeah.
of doing it the way you've done it, where you're like, I'm going to make
Mhm,
sure those things happen. And if I can like squeeze in something else, great. I don't need to, because the most important things are there.
yeah.
Which is really, really beautiful. So
Like,
I want to rewind a second, because I did kind of skip over the fact that you live in a studio with two children, which is absolutely
I
mind
have
blowing in some ways.
moved,
So can you kind of describe
I have
what'd
since
you
moved
say?
to a one bedroom because my kids really wanted a room with a door, and I'm quoting them. But it's not about the size of the apartment. It's about being mindful of the stage in your life that you're in. I'm not saying I'm always going to live in a studio or always going to live in a one bedroom or five bedroom. My life is constantly going to change. So I don't want somebody to think that the solution to their problem or to decluttering is to move into a small space. It's absolutely not. But it is when people move to a big space, but then they don't want to invest, or they can invest into somebody to come and help them, like to have a home employee, or not being intentional what you can do or what you can't. Like, yes, there's going to be a day that I might live in a bigger house, but I'm going to be very intentional about what I have in the house. Do I uh, like, if I'm going to have a lot of guests, I have to have a beautiful area where I can entertain my guests. If I'm going to, it's just about being intentional and considering what stage in your life you're in. I feel like a lot of people just, they go with certain way that it has been done, or they see on TV or they see on Instagram, and they think that is the only way. But when you realize what's important to you and build your life around that, I feel that's what I want everybody to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you point that out, that we can shift what works for us and what doesn't, right? Because
Mhm.
especially in this like decluttering minimalism space, it's really easy to be like less, 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 less. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's truth to that, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that just because you have a bigger home, you can't be an intentional person,
Absolutely.
right? Like I live in a larger home now.
Mhm.
Just we're military, so we move every 3 years, and this is kind of how the cookie crumbled here in Florida. Is we are in a larger home than we were when we were in Alaska, and I prefer a smaller home, like honestly, for even in the stage of life we're in with 3 little kids, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of housework, and it's just easier to maintain a smaller home, like you've mentioned. However, that doesn't mean that our big home is like is has clutter everywhere and is impossible to maintain, right? So you can adjust as needed for whatever
Absolutely.
space that you're in. And I love that you point that
Yeah.
out for sure. I'm
Mhm.
curious, when you did live into the studio, and now just even in a one bedroom, that is still a
Yeah.
small space for 3 people. As a single mom specifically, and having such small space, like what has been the hardest part about helping your kids pare down what they own, and just paring down in general and decluttering in general to be able to fit 3 people into such small spaces? Like what's been the hardest part there?
My girls are growing. So I have a middle schooler now who is getting annoyed by her little sister. So she wants her space. But what I tried to do is I actually had a creative idea of separating their space with like a little curtain, and it worked great. But in the future, obviously, I would want them to have their own space. But at the moment, this works. And, um, I'm a single mom, I'm a business owner, and I have a lot of hobbies and a conscious parent, which takes a lot of energy. And I also like take improv classes. I make life fun. I'm there for my community. There's so much going on in my life that right now I I can spend my money either on a bigger apartment, or I can spend it on something like traveling with my kids, which is very important for them that we all enjoy, or investing into coaching programs where I am changing my limiting beliefs. So I just go with what's most important. And as long as they're fine with this setup for now, I'm going to live like that and prioritize what's more important. Once I'm at a place where there, a bigger room or more rooms is more important for them, that's what I will prioritize. Like I said, I'm very flexible right now, going with the flow and being mindful of what we need most right now, and designing my life around that. And then when it changes, I will make different
Mm.
decisions. But this is what's most important, because I went from somebody who depended on my spouse for all financial needs for 17 years to somebody who has to make sales, something I have never been comfortable with, to put myself out there. So that requires a lot of, you know, changing my beliefs and working on myself. And in the process, I'm actually teaching my kids everything that I learn. And it's so exciting to see them at such a young age do a lot of that. But yeah, those are more important for me right now.
Everything you're saying, I'm like, yes, because it is, there's only so much money for most of us. And
Mhm.
so you have to decide, that's part of intentional
Yeah.
living. Do I want to spend it on a mortgage? Or do
Mhm.
I want to spend it, for us, it's like we take our kids on these camper van trips and all of that. And like sometimes I feel like, do people think we're weird that we don't spend money on the things that most people would spend money on? And
Mhm.
they would say then like a camper van type of a thing would be the extra. But kind of
Mhm.
like what we said earlier, to me, the camper van is the priority, the memories made there, and the stuff that like paying for sports that like we can't really afford to put our kids in travel sports, while we
Mhm.
also have this going on. And the rest of the world, the conventional way of doing it is if you don't have money for travel sports, then how can you have money to do the traveling with your family?
Mhm.
But it's a
Mhm.
matter of deciding what's most important for you. So I absolutely hear everything you're saying, and that could change. I don't know what our life is going to look like in 10 years and all of that, but it's all about that intentionality for where you are right now, and not just doing it the conventional
Yeah.
way. But yeah, I want to hear about getting rid of the stuff too. Like, did your kids, when you guys moved into obviously a small space, they had to get rid of books and toys and belongings, and what was that process like?
Okay. So for my kids, their values are they really love having play dates and sleepovers. I have like 4 or 5 mattresses from IKEA that are very thin, but they're on top of each other. So it doesn't seem like you can't even see those mattresses. But if they have a sleepover, they have so many comfortable things that I can make into a huge party, you know? And another thing that's important for them
That's
are,
so smart.
yeah, you can't even tell when you go because they're very thin. So you can have like 2 or 3, and the fitted sheet kind of like shows it as one. But then when we have a sleepover, like everybody has their own space. And another thing they care about is like board games with me, right? So we have board games, and when we get tired of those, we just donate it and then we get a different one. Another thing that we care about is a trampoline. And I do have a trampoline that goes either in the patio or sometimes it comes into the living room. And what else? I try not to have them use their devices too often. We have a balanced device use where, like, they will get maybe half an hour to an hour a day. But also, we have movie nights. We don't have a TV, but we have a projector that we make into an experience. And so we have all those important things that is like they care about. And we just do that. So they're a little bit older to have too many toys and stuff. But when they did have toys, when they were in that stage, I would have just their absolute favorites. And I really highly recommend the book Simplicity Parenting. If somebody doesn't know like what to keep and thinks kids have to have a lot of things to not be bored, it's a great book. So when they had their absolute favorite toys, but few of them, they would actually spend so much time on getting creative, using it in other ways. And then they would get tired, and I would either rotate it or donate this one and get a different one. We always had just the right amount of toys that it was possible for everybody to be happy by just cleaning it up or playing with it. So it never became overwhelming.
Yeah, that's kind of where we are now too. And it is so nice. And they really love the things that they do have. Um, and I love that you're pointing out that you don't have to keep something just because you loved it for a long time. Like even the board game thing, like saying that you donate it and get a different one. You don't have to have all 20 options of board games available at all times, especially for something like that, that is really easy to find at a thrift store or
Mhm.
reacquire in a way that isn't wasteful. Um,
Mhm.
so, I think a lot of us, we have this, what if we want to play that one night? We need to keep all of them. And you're saying, no, we play the
No.
one for a while. It's like we get on a roll and we go to
Mhm.
the next one, like
Yeah,
I think that is really valuable advice.
yeah, and a lot of people think they have to have everything. Oh, but what if I need it? What happened to asking a neighbor or, you know, going online? And there's so many groups now, like buy nothing groups and stuff, where you can actually get something from there. Like that person wants to get rid of it, but knows that it's going to somebody that's going to appreciate it. So it feels good for them. It feels good for you. And you can, there is just so many options. And sometimes you get really creative. If you don't have something, you use something else instead, or you come up with a new game. Like we're just so, our imagination is so big, but we don't give enough credit to that, I feel like.
I couldn't agree more. We had a little yesterday. So when people are listening, this is going to be in a couple weeks from now. But yesterday was Mother's Day, right? Or 2 days ago. I don't know what day of the week. Is today Monday, Sona? Okay. Yesterday was Mother's Day. I don't know. It's already feels like Thursday and it's only Monday. Goodness gracious. So anyway, my stepmom was in town, and so my daughter and my stepmom and I had a little tea party, and I do happen to have some teacups, but my son wanted to join or whatever. And all I had to do was take a coffee cup out and put it on a salad plate, and that's his teacup, right? Like you don't have to have all of the fancy
Exactly.
sets to make sure everybody gets one. Like it's fine. It's going to be okay. So, with all these different choices that you're making that it came at the head of a difficult time in your life where I'm sure for me, I've never been through that kind of a situation, but it would feel to me like, are people watching me and what I'm doing and the decisions I'm making as I'm going through this really difficult time? And then you
Mhm.
make these unconventional choices. Did you ever face any sort of judgment or backlash for making a choice that felt good for you, but that was, quote, abnormal for maybe the average person?
There were two things. Like, one, people just really were like, why are you so happy? Like, how are you this happy? Some of them didn't believe. They thought I was faking it because I had gone to a smaller place, but I was so happy with it. So they didn't really understand it. And then another, like, I got a lot of judgment for the decision I made about settling. I could have, the divorce, just because I had great marriage, I thought the divorce process was going to be great too, but it was not. And when it came to money, like I realized that my ex-husband had very different values and way of thinking. So it became so painful to be in court that I decided to give him everything he wanted. I just left without much and decided to put all of that energy into creating a business and helping other moms. Because having my purpose, that was something that is something actually I always felt like I was lacking. I couldn't put a word to it, but all throughout my marriage, even at the best times, like I felt like something was missing, and that was my purpose. Like I always knew that I needed to help people, and I just did it through, giving all of my love and stuff to my kids, and that is great, but I wanted to do more. And at that moment when I decided to leave everything and walk away and start a business, like within 2 days, I had a website, I had two people that I helped, and within 2 weeks, I had my first paying client. And that's when I realized, like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is great. And a lot of people thought it was like, oh, but you're not thinking about your kids. You should have gone to court. You should have fought for what was yours. And I just did not at the time have the energy to go through that. And I didn't want that, because when you are stressed, when you feel resentment, your kids can absorb all of that. They can feel it. And I did not want them to feel any of that. So I just decided that I was going to create something myself. And some people still criticize that decision. Some people understand it now that I have been, growing as a business. But I still believe that that was the right decision for me.
Uh, well, first of all, I'm sorry that it wasn't as smooth as you had hoped. And I'm sorry because it is painful when money starts to become more important than everything else during whether it's a divorce or during death. When my mom passed away, I was really fortunate for the most part about how things were handled. But it did take my brother and I having a conversation. He and I were always on the same page, but saying no matter what happens with anybody else who is involved with this, um, the most important thing is love and representing mom well and maintaining the relationships she would want us to maintain. Um, not about squeezing out every penny we could, you know, like that's
Yeah.
just not going to be our priority.
Yeah.
And going into it, I'm so grateful that we decided to take that approach also because my mom had instilled in us that materialism and money is just not where you're going to find happiness. And so we can look at something and say maybe that's not totally fair, and the
Hmm.
rest of the world is going to say, well, fight for what's yours, fight for what's fair. And like you said, is it worth the energy, even if it's not worth the relationship for whatever reason? But like
Hmm.
you were protecting your own peace and how that affected your kids.
Yeah.
And that's yet again, like you said, another unconventional choice you made that that speaks to why living with less and being very intentional about your life actually brings you so much peace in a way that confuses people, because people
Hmm.
are like, well, money, that's what you want, is everyone wants some more money, and you're like, that's just not going to make me happy, is sitting in
Yeah.
court and trying to get money when that's not even my value, and it's not the value you want to teach your kids, that it's worth ruining relationships and all of that so you can get more money, right? That's certainly not what I want
Yeah.
to teach my children. And I
Hmm.
certainly don't want them fighting over money when I pass away, right? Like that's just
Yeah.
incredibly important to me. So,
Hmm.
I do understand that, and I am so sorry that you went through that, because it is painful when people
Yeah.
show you a side of them because of money that you didn't see before, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing so vulnerably what you went through, but I think that's such a beautiful example of how deep this can go, this minimalist life and the peace that comes with it. Speaking of that experience and you living in the studio, how else do you think you show up in the world in an unconventional way? Like what makes you, because you are just in general, like if I look at your Instagram feed, I'm like, this woman's awesome. So tell me more of some of the things you do that are probably not what most women are doing.
Um, One thing is that I'm very honest with my kids and I talk to them, of course, in terms that is age appropriate and stuff, but like I'm teaching my 12-year-old business right now. She's actually doing my emails to some of my clients. I have templates and everything, of course, but she changes, the names and the appointment time and everything, and she's so good at it. And I transfer money into her credit card and she spends that money on buying K-pop albums that she's really into. So she's feeling very empowered in like, okay, if I want something, mom, do you have any work for me? And then she does it and then she gets paid. And she feels very and she understands money now, like she understands what it takes to make money, what it takes to work, and she's learning so much. So this is something unconventional, I would say, maybe. And another thing is I skateboard with my kids. It's something that I picked up when COVID hit. It's like a new thing. I had never stood on a skateboard before, but I learned to kind of teach them, and they ended up not caring much about it. So, like, I got so into it. Like, I would go into skate parks and go up and down and all those things. What else? There is a convention like that. You know how you go to get better at some like self growth conventions or whatever. There was a parent that was like, oh, I wish like I could take my own kids too to these things. Why is it only for adults? So he actually created something called Mind Valley University, and where kids from like 70 countries come and they learn mindset shifts and all of that. And there's classes also for adults. So like in the summer we would attend and the kids learn so much about, everything to become better, as humans, as successful entrepreneurs, and how to have a positive self-talk and all that important stuff. And yeah, I really care about living life to the fullest and enjoying your life like every single day, especially after losing my parents and realizing like all of that hard work and the money that my mom saved and all those things. Like she always lived for the future. And I try to live in the present, and I try to teach my kids, because ultimately all I want for my kids' future is for them to be happy and to learn that it is as important as anything else. Because I read a lot of um, psychology books, and on positive psychology in particular, and it says it's not when you're successful you become happy. It's not when you get the job or when you get the relationship you want, when you have your baby, that you get happy. It's when you're happy, when you learn how to make yourself happy, everything in your life starts blossoming, because your brain gets more creative, because you see opportunities. So my ultimate goal is to teach them how to learn to make themselves happy, live in the present.
Yes, to find that within, to
Yeah.
find it in yourself and find the ways to bring it out. Like, to bring it out. Like for you, you have so much fun when you're skateboarding. Like,
Hmm.
we need to have fun. That's important.
Yeah.
And so many adults, we just don't have fun, and we're looking for happiness instead of creating it, or finding it, I should say, within ourselves too. I was
Hmm.
definitely thinking of the skateboarding one when I was talking about your Instagram. I just think it's so cool as you like go around town and you've got your headphones on, and I'm like, this woman is like way too cool to ever be my friend, but she's awesome.
Oh my God. I
I
feel the
love it.
same way about
Um,
you. I'm like, she's so cool and she's so down
oh, well,
to earth, and you make it so easy to have a conversation with you. I'm like, I wish I had that. You're so relatable.
oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So, I would love to hear, what is your advice? Like, what would you tell someone who wants to try something new, maybe make a different choice in their lives, whether it's, living with a lot less or something else, but they're afraid to do it because it's not the norm? What would you say to them?
I know this sounds very cheesy, but you do only live once. And on the day that you're at your deathbed, you don't want to think about all the people that thought like this looks weird and stuff. Like the biggest regret I hear older people say is like, why did I care so much what people thought? Or why did I do this? You never regret about stuff that you did, because at least you learned something from it, or you learned that you don't like it. But when you don't try, you never find out. And then you don't want to have regrets later in life. And if you're really timid um, about trying something new, start small. Start something that you're at least a little bit familiar with, but maybe haven't done for a long time. Just get into it, or just try a class, or something that really has helped me is I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Artist's Way. It's basically helps you to find that inner
No.
child in you. It's the best. It's sold millions of copies all over the world, being translated to 70 languages or more, I think. And it's all about learning who that person was inside as a kid, before society, school, your environment started packing layers and making you have those fears. It's a really cool book, because it's like 12 weeks. You do certain homework, you take yourself out on a date just by yourself. It's really valuable. And I feel like that will help them figure out what they want to do with their lives.
Sweet. I will totally look that up, and I will link it in the show notes so that everybody can click on it and just get themselves a copy. That sounds awesome. I'd love to read that. And what you're saying reminds me too a little bit. So when my mom was passing away, one of the very last things she said to me was, well, I had asked her, like, what do you want me to know? Right. Big question. I was 24. I don't think I realized how big of a question that was for her as she was on her literal deathbed. And she said, and it was a little bit flippant at the time, and I think I've told this story on my podcast before, but she said, Shannon, don't save the good wine. There
Mhm.
are a bunch of bottles of wine that I was saving for a special occasion, and now I will never know what they taste like.
Mhm.
And that don't save the good wine has become my anthem for life, right? It is
I got these.
why I am like you. I'm like, let's live in the present, right? Isn't that something? Like, because it can apply to so many things. And what you're saying and what this implies isn't that we don't ever think about our future, of course, duh. But what it means is that instead of looking back when we pass away and having regrets about things, it means that we take the bull by the horns, that we dive in, that we try the hard things, we try the new things, we we do the things that we think about doing, that we dream about doing, and so many of us just never actually do it, right?
Mhm.
And just to celebrate today, like there's always a reason to pop the good wine. You don't have to save it for an anniversary or for this or for that, because today in itself is
Mhm.
celebratory. And so yeah, everything you were saying just reminded me of that. So thank you,
I
because that touched me, and I need that. Even though I have that in my head, I need that reminder.
Yeah, I think I read that story in your Instagram once, and I was like, this is so true. Like, we always save the best for the future, but we can romanticize our lives every day. I am not saying don't plan anything for the future. I have very big plans. I have such big plans. Sometimes it's mind blowing, and I'm moving towards that direction. All I'm saying is not to be attached to that, just have that in your mind where you want to go and live every day trying to make the best of it, and move closer to that goal. Like every week, I decide three important things that I'm going to do that week to move closer to my goals. And as a mom, sometimes your kid gets sick, or they have needs that week that you need to give them more emotional connection and attention. And before, I would be so frustrated. I was like, oh my God, I had this goal. Now I'm like, I have the goals and I'm going to do them. But if life happens in the way and my kids needs me, or something in my business goes a different direction, I'm fluid. I can be okay with it and still go to that future. As long as you're not attached to an outcome where you want to where you want to go and are taking steps every day, you're going to be fine.
Exactly. It's the difference of saying I will be happy when
Mm,
versus
mhm,
dreaming and being excited about the future, right? Those
mhm.
are two very
Yes.
different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty. Well, for the sake of time, yeah, it is time for the final two questions that I ask everyone on the podcast. So the first one is, what is something that you are paring down right now?
What am I paring down right now? What I'm paring right down is information, because I am very intentional with everything in my surroundings, with like what's in my physical surroundings. But when it comes to new classes, new lessons, new coaching programs, all of that is so exciting. The knowledge, the books, the podcast, there's just so much that I want to do. But I've realized that I can get just as overwhelmed as my clients get with their items in their home. So I started doing what I tell them, you know, just follow the same exact steps and choose the most important things, and little by little just do those first. And if you don't have time for the rest, that's okay. The most important ones are that requires your attention right now. So that's something I'm trying to pare down.
Oh, I love that answer.
Mhm.
So good. So good. And what is something that you are looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? I am looking forward to writing a book on simplifying my life. And I'm going to tell lots of stories from my life, from my clients' experiences, and have like step by step um, guide of how to simplify every part of your life, from your surroundings to your mind to digital clutter to your diet, your values, the beliefs you hold, the friendships, like everything, just becoming very intentional with what you keep in your life.
That sounds awesome. As someone who has written a book, it is
Mhm.
the hardest thing, and it is the most fun and most rewarding thing at the end. You hold it in your hands and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like it happened," right? Like it's really exciting. So I'm excited for you to experience that. And I'm excited for all of us to be able to hear all of your wisdom inside of it on all these different things, because yeah, I mean that's kind of why I honestly call my podcast paring down, because it's that bigger umbrella of like I want to pare down and be intentional about everything, pare down my schedule, pare down what I'm eating, pare down
Mhm.
um my relationships, right? You can just really get intentional about every aspect. So I love that you're going to put that into book form. That's amazing. Okay, well, where can everyone find you online? Where can they follow along and get to know you a little bit better?
So I'm on Instagram at theminimalist.me. My website is also theminimalist.me. I'm also on Facebook. I think it is, facebook.com/Sona Minimalist PO. I think that's about it.
Awesome. Well, I'll link that all in the show notes so everyone can go follow there. And I'll put the book that she had mentioned in there. And just thank you so much, Sona, for coming on. Your story and the way that you've decided to make choices that are unconventional in such a confident and peaceful and not judgmental of other people's way, and like very gentle with yourself and
Mhm.
fluid. I mean, all of it is just really inspiring. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It really means a lot because I have so much respect for everything that you do. And thank you so much for this privilege to come and talk to you.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face, so thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at Paring Down Podcast, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.